name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission, as always, is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. And today, we're going to be talking about a lot of really real stuff and really kind of laying out for you what are the negative aspects of living in Alaska, because obviously our expectation is not that Alaska is going to be absolutely perfect all the time. Like, that is not an expectation. If it is, you're probably found yourself in some utopia timeline, and make sure that you stay in that utopia timeline, because it doesn't get much better than that. So today we'll be talking about what 8 aspects are negative about living in Alaska, and maybe a couple things about, what it is that you should be doing about that. But before we get started, though, do make sure you give this video a like, subscribe, and also make sure you comment down below. Every video, I do highlight one of the comments in the comments section and see if I can answer those, or see if that comment actually adds something to the video that was created. Now, without further ado, let's go and jump into today's video. All right, these aspects of living in Alaska I'm going to give you are really in no particular order, but one of the big ones right off the bat is that Alaska as a whole seems like it's a little soft on crime. I know it has nothing in comparison with some places in the lower 48, but compared to what I'm used to and compared to what I've seen from living in Alaska, it really does feel like the state has gone softer on crime than it was before. And I mean, you can see this in our judicial systems. Like, I've been in courts and I hear discovery hearings for crimes that were committed back in 2018. And there is just there's a logjam of cases right now, and doesn't really seem to be any talk about how we can actually improve the justice system to make sure that we're not just constantly catching and releasing the exact same criminals over and over and over. So that for me is really a big one. If you are someone who's more law oriented, like that's more your skill set, you're an attorney, then you might actually consider Alaska, because we definitely do need representation up here, with this the only state that does not have a law school. So you can imagine it's a little bit difficult for us to send our law school-minded people to other states and then expect them to come back after they've built their networks in other places. So I would definitely put that as one of the negatives. A little soft on crime, but also, as long as you are really cognizant of which area it is that you're moving into, whether or not you'll run into any crime or be a victim, I'll let you be the one to make that call. But the big thing is just take a look at the actual crime map and then compare it to where you currently live, just so you have a baseline understanding. The second negative of living in Alaska is that there's just not a whole lot of career opportunities. Okay, you can find jobs, that's easy enough. If you were looking for something that's more middle to like upper management, and you're looking for like this really big successful career, and that's going to be something that's really important to you, Alaska may or may not have a whole lot to offer. There's just, you get to a certain point where the population is too small to really support a lot of these other big industries and a lot of the numerous opportunities that you might find in some other place you might find in the lower 48. If you were looking at, maybe like a city like Dallas or Miami, something like that, opportunities galore down there, and you just don't really have that up here in Alaska. So if a big career is something that's going to be super important to you, I kind of question why you would be looking at Alaska. But also, if it's not the most important thing to you, it's important but not the most important thing, just understand there's probably going to be some element of a sacrifice, no matter how hard you work and all the contributions you make to make up that difference. There's going to be some element of sacrifice there, and as long as you're okay with that, nothing wrong with that. The third thing that I would list here is that seasonal affective disorder is definitely a big thing, and this is something I really didn't have much of an understanding of until a couple of years ago. But what seasonal affectiveness disorder is, essentially you start developing depression around certain times of the year, usually because of the darkness, and that kind of makes me at least really want to kind of self-isolate a little bit and get away from people, and that just makes that cycle just that much more vicious, and it's really not good. So seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, can happen during the wintertime or also during the summertime, at least for me, because there's too much sunlight during the summertime, which makes it very difficult for me to actually sleep. And I don't know about you, but if you are, looking at about a month or so of just sleep deprivation, it can really make it difficult to be bright and chipper and anything but depressed. So yes, sad is definitely can be a big negative aspect of living in Alaska. Whether or not it's going to be something that's going to impact you or not, that's going to be something you're going to find out once you get here. It's unfortunately, I don't think it's something you can really test for to see if it's something you're vulnerable for. When it happened to me, I mean, I just woke up one day and I was sad, and that was about it. So it's really not something that you get a whole lot of heads up on. And some people just skate right on through, and like they're just little creatures of the darkness up here in the wintertime. It doesn't faze them. But for some people, it is something that really does impact them. So the best thing I can say is if you are in the latter camp, just make sure you are really staying engaged with community and friends and everything. And make sure you're keeping challenged during the wintertime, because that can be a really tough time of the year. All right, in keeping with what I just said, number 4 is going to be the cold and the darkness. So I put these in here both together just because they are kind of the dominant characteristics of the winter time. So yes, the cold and the darkness really are significant. And if it's something where that's going to be a negative thing for you, then it's really something you should kind of stop and considering whether or not you should move to Alaska, because you're really not going to change the environment too much, and you can go on vacations to other places to kind of get that sunlight and everything you might need during the wintertime. But you have to think, what happens if I can't take these trips? Or what happens if there's a year where, for whatever reason, we can't do any trips, or a couple of years we can't do any trips? Can I be okay with being in Alaska without taking a single trip out of state in order to get some sunlight? If the answer is no, the decision is yours, but it is something you should definitely consider. All right, we're going to be finishing up our video in just a bit here, but let's take a quick break and answer one of the comments we have in the comment section here. So this is coming in here, and it says, my fiance and I are considering moving to Eagle River. That is the small town to the north of Anchorage from the UK. Well, congratulations, and we are super worried about bears. But besides the bears, it seems like the perfect place for us. So the thing about bears that you have to keep in mind is you're really not going to run into them for the most part unless you are in their habitat. And even if you do run into them in town here in Eagle River, which I've seen a couple, but when they're in town, they're not here to stay, and they are very flighty, and they're going to try to avoid you and just run away the second that they see you. The biggest thing that you can do when you're in some kind of a bear's habitat, like I'm walking down by the river or in the mountains or something like that, be as loud as possible, and make sure you have some kind of bear spray with you. Because I know some people really tout having some kind of a firearm or something like that, but you're not going to drop a bear with some kind of a firearm, regardless how big it is, if it's charging with you and has the intent to take you out. Your best option is actually to have bear spray, because when you hit a bear with bear spray, like right in the snout where they're really sensitive, they're going to have a bunch of physiological responses to that bear spray that they can't override, okay? Even if you are a great shot and you able to take the bear down and it's physically non-existent, then it can still take you out. Okay, it's got that much adrenaline, it can still keep going. So that's what I would say there. Alaska's absolutely beautiful. UK is absolutely beautiful as well. Visited there, and it's chef's kiss. Would recommend it. Great thing about UK is you can actually go over there and everything's beautiful. It's Europe. And also you understand what's going on. So that's the great thing about the UK if you're an American. Now, let's go and finish up today's video. All right, the fifth negative aspect of living in Alaska is that there's really not a whole lot of infrastructure up here in Alaska compared to what we might have in the lower 48. So if you go to the lower 48, you're going to have lots of options in how you can get from point A to point B. And that is just not what you have up here in Alaska. You're going to have a couple of roads. And if for whatever reason those roads are out of commission, like I guess you're not going. Like it is just really that simple. And, for some people that's great. And for other people, it definitely does present some limitations that you just have to live with. All right, the sixth thing that I would put on this list is you are definitely isolated from friends and family down in the lower 48. And yes, they will come up and they will visit, and it's still going to be majority of the time you're probably going to be up here. And if you're coming up here as an adult, you're going to have to get good at developing the new friendships, because most people who are up here in Alaska, they are going to be kind of in their own zone. They're not ignoring you, but they do have their own lives. And unless you're in like a church setting, most people are not going to necessarily be going out of their way to befriend you, partly because, people are busy. But secondly, we do see a lot of people come and go up here, and we can kind of get into this cynical state of mind where we're going, well, is it really worth building a relationship with so-and-so? There's a good chance that they end up not staying here anyway, and I'm really not wanting to build a relationship with anyone else that doesn't actually turn into that person being here long term. So that is going to be something you just have to break through, and just be persistent up here about building friendships, but also keep those relationships in the lower 48. Just understand there's going to be some element of isolation from them up here. All right, the fifth negative aspect of living in Alaska is going to be the higher cost of living. Now, I put this one on here, but I'm looking at you, the lower 48, and it looks like you guys are actually catching up with us as far as the cost of living. And it's kind of our gain, your loss, but just with the cost of inflation and everything that's been happening, cost of living in Alaska has kind of started to become a little bit more affordable compared to lower 48. Yes, cost of living is still higher up here, but by how much is starting to diminish a little bit just because you guys are closing the gap. All right, last but not least is a lot of the decisions that really do impact the overall trajectory and welfare of the state is going to be decided in D.C. as opposed to actually in the state of Alaska. And this is historically one of the weirdest parts about living in Alaska, where our destiny is really tied up in what's going on in the halls of the legislature and the executive branch down in Washington, D.C. And the decision about whether or not we're going to develop our own resources is really directly tied to the overall welfare of Alaska as a state. And so for that reason, it can be kind of a negative that you have so much of your state's welfare tied up in what people who are never actually been to the state are saying like thousands of miles away. So these are going to be the negative aspects about living in Alaska for a lot of you. These are just they're just inconsequential. And for some of you, they're definitely consequential. So you can be up here certainly and have all these negatives and they bother you. And it's also not going to stop you from being up here because the positives far outweigh the negatives. So you just have to know who you are and at least be aware of these things going into it. But I've rambled long enough. My name is Jamin, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.